And Adrian Peterson says NFL players will kneel this year, but President Trump says no kneeling. Will players and owners ignore the president this time? Join the conversation by commenting live on YouTube and Facebook Live. This is the Fifth Chapter with Dennis Fithian and Brian Chapman. He represents the mitten by way of Penn State with Chapman. It's NFL sports, but people can't wait. He
but President Trump says no kneeling. Will players and owners
and his veins bleeding blue. They got respect for the state. When that light turns red, so don't sleep on these dudes. Just invite your friends to cut your nap short and tip your cap for and sit back for the Fifth Chapter. Brian Chapman, Dennis Fithian. When they open their mouths, they spit in the facts, bro. This ain't even optional, man. You just have to tune into YouTube to watch the broadcast or download it to your phone to peep the podcast. They mix laughter, they get after. It's all captured in the Fifth Chapter. That's right, and welcome to the Fifth Chapter. I am Brian Chapman. He is Dennis Fithian, and as you may have noticed, Dennis has a much different background today. You've got some explaining to do for our audience.
Yeah, well, it's good to see you, chap. I am down in St. Augustine, Florida. I came down here to bring my mom back to Michigan. So I'm going to be down here for a week at my Uncle George's, and it's just south of Jacksonville. I drove down on Sunday, got in here Monday morning.
So how long of a drive was that for you?
Well, I didn't drive the whole way through. I stopped south of Atlanta at Macon, Georgia, and then I did the other 5-6 hours on Monday morning. So
that's about 17 hours, 18?
Yeah, something around there. Not the easiest, but as you keep driving down, you go through, you take that trip down 75, whether it's Bowling Green, and then you see the Cincinnati football stadium, then you're driving through Louisville, and you see Man of War Street. It reminds you of racing. You get down and went right through Atlanta. And we'll get to this. I saw a sweet billboard of Ronald Acuna Jr. right before he got to Atlanta's baseball stadium, and it was a sweet billboard that said, "We play," and it just got me upset. I'm like, no, you guys don't. You guys do not play. You're doing nothing but upsetting me. But, and then you get in, you see the tall pines there south of Atlanta, and it reminds you of Augusta. And, hey, you start seeing the signs for Augusta, and you start thinking about the Masters, man. Nothing but sports on my mind all the way down here and then through Jacksonville, now here in St. Augustine.
Yeah, and you mentioned a billboard for Ronald Acuna Jr. If the Tigers were going to put up a billboard, there'd be nobody to put up. I mean, would you put up old Miggy? Would you put up first half of last year, Matt Boyd? Would you put up your boy, Jamer Candelario? Honestly, the best might be Casey Mize, who's never pitched for the Detroit Tigers. But as far as today's show is concerned, as we get ready for 5 fantastic chapters, want to welcome everybody in who's watching on YouTube and, of course, on Facebook Live. This is our first ever show broadcast on Facebook Live, so thank you to all those who are watching that way. Also, thank you to all those listening to the podcast via Apple, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. Make sure that you like, subscribe, and participate in each show by sending in your comments in the live stream on YouTube. Beginning Thursday, I believe, we'll be able to start taking your comments via Facebook as well. But first, let's take a look at today's book so you know what's going on in the 5th chapter. In the 2nd chapter, as Dennis mentioned, Major League Baseball. When are we going to see any baseball? And he told me just moments before the show there was a new proposal out there. Is it going to be 76 games, 48 games, 0 games? Is there another number that we could see in 2020? In the 3rd chapter, Paul Finebaum is picking on Dennis's boy, J.I. Block M. Harbaugh again. You'll hear exactly what he had to say about Harbaugh this time. In the 4th chapter, Adrian Peterson says that NFL players will kneel this year, but Donald Trump sent out a tweet last week that said no kneeling. So what's going to happen? And in the 5th chapter, it's game time. We're going to be playing Spartan, Wolverine, or Buckeye. And, of course, you guys can play along with us. Yeah, that's right. The first time we played it, but you got all 3 wrong. Well, I had 5 questions, but you got the first 3 wrong, so there was no need to go to questions 4 and 5. But let's start off with the 1st chapter. We don't have baseball right now because of the pandemic, but if you are a Detroit Tigers fan in the Al Avila era, you're a lot like a Detroit Tigers fan, because you know that basically the pinnacle of your baseball season is the draft. For the last 3 years, the Tigers have had the first overall pick twice. 2 years ago was Casey Mize. Tomorrow, who is it going to be? Could it be Arizona State first baseman Spencer Torkelson? He's been the number one overall consensus draft, number one overall pick by all the mock drafts for months, even years. And almost all of the mock drafts have the Arizona State slugger going to the Tigers first overall. In 2018, he led all of college baseball as a true freshman with 25 home runs, was 7th in OPS. But is he a lock? Just about every mock draft has him going first, but one by Elizabeth Finney of Bleacher Report says not so fast. There's another name that Tigers fans might want to know, and that is Austin Martin. I put up her article right there on the screen so you can see it. But she breaks down these two prospects, and as you can see, she says Austin Martin is consistent at the plate, ending his 3 seasons at Vanderbilt with a .368 batting average and a 1,007 OPS. He totaled 57 extra base hits, 14 of them homers. Later, it goes on to say, defensively, the Florida native started games at 6 different positions as a freshman before finally settling in at third base the following season. However, he remains an extremely versatile defender. And then she closes by saying Martin opened his junior year at third base and then made the move to center field, where he's also a solid defender. One defensive concern is his throwing, which scouts were hoping to see put to the test before the 2020 season was cut short. And then when it comes to Spencer Torkelson, the name that perhaps more of you are familiar with, and the guy who is the consensus outside of this Elizabeth Finney lady as the number one overall pick for the Tigers. She says, after not being drafted out of high school, Spencer Torkelson made it clear from the onset that he was not to be overlooked. Check this out. He broke Barry Bonds' freshman home run record with 25 bombs at Arizona State. He went on to finish his collegiate career with a whopping 54 homers. And of course, that's just in 2 years and 17 games this year. And then she later goes on to say, in addition to having one of the best bats in the class, he's able to control his at-bats to draw walks. Nobody was pitching to him. And says, while Torkelson's solid defensively and has improved tremendously at first base with stints playing for USA Baseball and Team USA, his at-bats are what make him a standout player. So, Dennis, there's the lowdown on both of those guys. Is Spencer Torkelson the lock at number one? Is he your choice, or do you think that maybe Austin Martin out of Vanderbilt should be wearing the Old English D?
Well, I think Torque should be a Tiger. I don't think there's much doubt about that. But the more you read about Austin Martin, the more you like him. Man, the guy just doesn't strike out. The way the game's going, positionless baseball, play him at third, play him at second, play him in center, playing a couple games over at the hot corner, then put him in the outfield, like the Tigers did back in the day with Mickey Stanley, although he was playing shortstop. And, you look at some of the metrics, you look at some of the other things like exit velocity, which pretends that he should be able to get some power. He doesn't have much at Vanderbilt, or didn't have much, but it looks like he could have that. So, you're looking at everything here. I think if you're somebody that – I saw Keith Law say that he would take Martin because of the upside and the premier position. And the one thing about Torque, he played running back in high school, and Arizona State put him out in the outfield a little bit. You could, if you were the Tigers, put him out in left field. But if they do that, immediately you start thinking about Nick Castellanos, and if they do that, they really would have to commit to putting him in the outfield for a couple years. But the comparisons when it comes down to Torque, chap, you're talking about Paul Goldschmidt. You're talking about the polar bear Pete Alonso for the Mets, the first baseman who hit over 50 home runs this year. And I also saw somebody compare him with his Torque's bat and his exit velocity to a hitter like Aaron Judge. That's the kind of power that Torkelson has. And look, when you're going to get picked number one overall, these are the kind of plaudits that you're going to get. These are the kind of comparisons. So, and Martin super utility, positionless player, speed, more of the 5-tool guy, or you're just talking to somebody who can just blast the ball. Torch the pick to me, for me. That would be the selection that I would make if I was the Tigers.
Yeah, he's the no-brainer for me as well, and he's been that for 3 years because we know the Tigers have been trashed for 3 years, so you can start to look forward to draft picks early. As a matter of fact, for the 2021 draft, I've known for a year or two that I wanted to be actually Austin Martin's teammate. I forget his name, but he's a pitcher. He's actually an African-American pitcher for Vanderbilt. He pitched extremely well in the College World Series last year, and I'm assuming the Tigers are going to be so bad they'll have the first overall pick next year. But for 3 years, I've been looking at Torkelson. When I found out as a true freshman he was leading college baseball in home runs, I was like, this is the guy the Tigers got to get. I know that Elizabeth Finney and some other people out there want to try to make a name for themselves, or they just want to put out articles this time of year saying not so fast and don't jump the gun and consider this guy and what if there's a curveball. But a couple of hours ago, what's his face, Lynn Henning actually put out a tweet that basically said, no, there's no reason to worry about jumping the gun. And I'll put the tweet up there for everybody to see. He said, Torkelson Tigers contract expected to be inked with no serious hangups. The usual finer line jostling and detailing are yet to be completed, but no impasse. So that says to me that all they're waiting for is 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock tomorrow to sign the deal. This is a done deal, but there shouldn't be any last-second cold feet by Al Avila, who's a terrible GM. This is an underhanded softball pitch to go take Torkelson. And, when I think about what he's done in 3 years in college or 2 years in 15 games, the best slugger all 3 years. When I think about where the game is going, where you're seeing, based on analytics, folks saying you need to hit home runs. When I see that last year, the top 5 teams in home runs all made the playoffs, and then the 7th and 8th teams made the playoffs, meaning only 3 teams that made the playoffs weren't in the top 8 in home runs. That's a reason to go after a home run hitter. And then think about this, Dennis. You know the prospects that the Tigers have. We know that they're heavily weighted toward pitchers, and they don't have much power, or they don't have many hitters. But when you think about the hitters they have, who's a slugger in the Tigers farm system, a premier slugger? They don't have any.
He's not in the farm system anymore. Christian Stewart was supposed to be a slugger. I think that's the slugger. By the way, Lynn Henning's broken more stories in retirement than he had, the whole 30 years that he covered the Tigers. So good job, Lynn. It's the one thing about the Tigers here. Why would they spill the beans early? You can't trade the pick, so go ahead and tell everybody who you're going to select. It doesn't really matter. I know they've been playing it close to the vest. It's like, hey, Al, you don't need – there's no reason not to tell anybody what you're going to do here, Weigh it out. Tell everybody what you're thinking, It's like you have all the cards. You can't deal them. You've got to take, one of the 2 guys. I don't know. Maybe there's some kind of negotiating ploy going on there. So if you say you're going to take Torque, and come out a couple days before, then they can just jack up the price a little bit more. But
even if there's a gas mask scenario like we saw with Laramie Tunsil in the NFL draft a couple years ago, he's coming to Michigan. Weed is legal here. I don't smoke that stuff, but he might decide that he wants to smoke some weed, and it's legal to do in Michigan. So even if he's worried about a last-second gas mask video, he's going to be okay with that. But this is a no-brainer. And look, I get that you want to do some more reading on Austin Martin, but he's not coming to Detroit. And then when I started doing some, and I saw what they were saying about him defensively, oh, is he an outfielder? Oh, is he a third baseman? Is he a second baseman? He's played 6 positions. I mean, yes, I get that perhaps he might be pretty good at all those positions, but if he was very good or elite, or Vanderbilt, which has one of the best college baseball systems in the country, knew where to put him, they would just lock him in at one space. And then when they talked about, wait a second, his throwing is an issue, I want a guy with the number 1 overall pick who A, has the highest upside, and B, doesn't have much of a low side. I don't want to have a guy who's going to be an infielder and is throwing like Chuck Knobloch.
No, I hear you. I mean, back in the day, like a super utility guy, he's like, hey, what are you getting, a rich man Shane Halter here? But the Dodgers have been moving guys around, so this is like the wave, like positionless players you could put him anywhere. But, would you rather have a new wave positionless player that has some 5 tools that might have something that you're thinking about his arm, or do you want a slugger? And you do want a slugger. I think the other thing is C.J. Cron, the Tigers signed him this year to play first base, and he's got a little bit of pop, but he's in his 30s here. The Tigers really don't have, you're talking about 2 years. They don't have anybody. You mentioned it, out of the minors or anything. And first baseman and power hitter, first baseman, slugging first baseman might be the easiest thing to find, but you also have to have one, and it would be great right there at first base to have somebody that could put it out of the park.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any first baseman prospects that the Tigers have. You look at infielding prospects, you got Isaac Paredes, who's going to be in AA or AAA this year. He was in AA last year. You got Riley Green, who was their first pick last year at 5th overall, and he's straight out of high school, so he's probably going to be in Lakeland. If they even have a minor league system this year, he's still years away. You got the bums that they got in the J.D. Martinez trade who are no good. You got Jake Rogers at catcher, who was terrible last year. But there's nobody we can even look at to say, oh, well, at least, even though he's a terrible prospect, he's a prospect at first base.
Yeah,
they've got nothing.
I'm not giving up on Rogers or Dawal Lugo yet. I know you are. You're giving up on
I'm not going to give up on Rogers.
Stewart. Okay.
I'm not going to give up on Rogers. I'm just saying he was terrible last year. I have given up on Christian Stewart and certainly Jamer Candelario. Jake Rogers, the problem with Jake Rogers was he was supposed to be a defensive-minded catcher who couldn't hit all that well. Not only did he hit $125, but every single game, this defensive-minded catcher was letting the ball get to the backstop. Half the time it was a wild pitch, which if you're a great defensive catcher, you can stop it from getting to the backstop. And the other half the time, it was a pass ball.
He got a pretty good arm, though. I did see that.
Oh, he has to catch the ball to use his arm. That's a problem.
All right, I'll give you that. So we're both on the same side here. It should be Torque. It should be an auto select. Tomorrow.
It should be auto select for Torkelson.
All right. Well, you know what? You're talking about a billboard and everything else. It'd be pretty cool maybe for a future star to put one up there in Detroit. Torkelson, he's the Tiger. It's going to what a great name and everything. But if Major League Baseball doesn't come to some kind of agreement to get some baseball here in 2020 with everything that's going on from the pandemic to protests across the country, it's like another Great Depression. And then baseball's like, yeah, you know what? We're not going to have a season this year. We're just going to go into next year. Man, talking about the bottom really dropping out of a sport. But, man, they keep going back and forth. What do we had? We had 82 games, 53 games, 115 games. Then this week it was the owners coming back, which was a pretty sly one, 76-game season, but just 7. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Oh, it was a 76-game season, but 75% of it was prorated, which equaled out to be 100% on the 53-gamer, about the same amount of money. And the baseball players were like, wait a second, what are we doing here? The baseball players just came back and said, look, we want our full prorated money, and we'll play an 89-gamer. There does seem to be like, look, can't we go to 81 games, which is exactly half? And how about 81% prorated? To me, that seems like a nice spot to land in the middle. Get an arbitrator, or, if they don't want to, if the owners are so worried about it going to a postseason and there being a second wave of the pandemic and them really taking a bath, whether can they buy insurance for that, or can the players really get involved? Do they want to put their money up and saying, hey, like if the postseason ends up getting canceled, well, then you're going to have to fork over some of that money. But, there's a deal to be made, but these guys neither side really seems like they want to make a deal.
So, because I'm just hearing about this now, you're saying that it's 89 games that's put forth by the players at 100% pro rate. Look,
that's what they want. That's what they want. Yeah.
Tony Clark came out, at least according to an ESPN article, saying that 114 games is not going to happen. And we knew that was never going to happen when they talk about ending the season on Halloween, and they know that they're not going to be able to start on the 4th of July now.
It's almost the middle of June. I mean, what are these guys? How many games they think they're going to get? They're going to get to July 4th and start talking about, now we can play 80. No, you can't.
Yeah, look, 89 games at least. At least they're getting closer, I guess, in terms of the number of games that they want to play. And at least when I see the 76-game proposal by the owners and saying 75% prorated salary, they're getting closer. So that continues to give me hope that there will be baseball this year. It's just frustrating that it's taking so long to get there. The longer that it takes, the shorter the season's going to be, because they can't just sit here and then on the 4th of July sign some deal and say, all right, the owners have given in to playing a 114-game season beginning on July 20th after an abbreviated 2-week spring training. It's look, the 48 games like they were talking about, the owners talking about, would be a joke because you can't ramp up with a spring training for 3 weeks only to have a 6 or 7 week season. You've got to have a bare minimum, I would think, of 65 to 70 games, but they need to try to play as close to 80 games as possible. And these
81 games, 81 games, come on.
82, whatever. And the owners need to just cave. They have to cave. If they were making all these record profits for years leading up to this, and they're only going to be losing $640,000 per game, then just cave for 70 to 80 games. It's that simple.
Well, they're trying to be, what's the saying, penny wise, pound foolish. Like, you're trying to save some money right now, and you might lose a couple million or whatever it's going to be. But like,
they'll lose billions, and they'll lose the game if they don't play this year, and if fans decide they don't want to come back. 17 months without baseball, and these players, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of the players or all the players say, you know what, if your best offer is 48 games, I'm not going to do it, because I'm not going to ramp up if I'm an older player like Verlander for 3 weeks in spring training just to go out there and give 10 starts, 8 starts before the playoffs. A lot of these star players might decide they're not going to do it, and a lot of players, period, might say 48 games isn't worth it.
No, I think you're right about that. I think that you remember what Jordan did with Adam Silver just a week or two ago when they came down with their playoff format. Jordan stepped in because there was the idea of doing the World Cup format, and I was kind of interested in that. Like, hey, it's a pandemic. You're rolling some out here in an unusual circumstance. Try a bunch of different things. But then, Jordan stepped in and said, look, we need to make this as close as possible for the integrity of the game and the integrity of the playoffs, to try to crown a champion, to feel like it's not going to be some kind of bastardized season or something. And to your point there, and Chris McCoskey from the Detroit News put a column out a day or two ago, he was saying, like, look, the lesser of two evils. If they're only going to play 48 games, to hell with it. You shouldn't play one at all. And to McCoskey's point there, you're talking about, you play 48 games, they go out and crown a World Series champ. People are going to be like, this is a fake champ. This is a joke of a champ. Like, some baseball is better than no baseball, but you still want to, at the end, feel like that that you've crowned a legitimate champ. And if they only play 48 games, even though that some baseball would be better than none, it would still feel like at the end, the postseason, like baseball's like, hey, we're back, we're doing 48 games. Hey, come on in, hot dogs, apple pie, baseball, everything's awesome. But then everybody's going to be like, nah, this is a weak season. Mm-hmm.
Well,
maybe the Tigers would, break 500 then.
No.
I mean, they could in a 48-game season. They could. They could play 500 baseball.
The Tigers are the second worst sports franchise in the entire lexicon of the four major sports, only ahead of the Detroit Red Wings. They're not going to sniff a 500 record in a 48-game span. Period.
2 years ago, I mean, that was their second 98-loss season in a row. They made it all the way to June 17th, and they were damn near 500. They could do it. The point is,
they were like 3 games below. I remember that. Then they tanked.
Oh, well, they had a
40
chance.
Games.
Well, they had a chance on Father's Day. I remember they were going down to Cincinnati. That they had Farmer on the mound too. They had Farmer and Boyd going, and I think they got to a game. Was it 2 games? I thought it was a game. Below 500.
They had 2 games in a row there, and the Reds were terrible. And folks were saying, hey, if they can win both of those games against the Reds, then they can be above 500. I'm thinking, but the Tigers are trash.
That was a good mark. But then Castellanos was out there, looking for the fly ball, and it bounced off his head or close to it, hit his mitt, went over the side.
And now they got Travis Demeritte.
They lost both of them.
To do the same thing. Yeah. Travis Demeritte.
Yeah. Yeah, well, he's just holding the place, for a couple of years. Placemat holder for a couple of years. Come on.
No, but look, last year I believe it was the Nationals were 19-31 in their first 50 games of the season, and they ended up winning the World Series. So I think from that standpoint it would look like a farce. But here's the real issue: if the pandemic was just starting to subside. And like we're sitting here on June 9th. If the numbers in terms of coronavirus deaths and coronavirus cases on June 9th was what it was on, let's say, April 20th, and all we got was a 48 game season, I think baseball fans would say, okay, I can deal with that, because right now we'd still be in the heat of the pandemic. But now that everything's subsided, or things have significantly subsided, now that you have 50 states opening up, now that here in the state of Michigan, yesterday we could go into bars and restaurants at a 50% capacity. If all we get is 48 games, it'll only be because of money. It won't be because the pandemic didn't allow them to start earlier. It'll be because the owners didn't cave. They wanted to be, I forget the phrase again, penny smart and dollar dummy or pound stupid. And
close enough.
Yes, that is what would anger fans. It wouldn't be the pandemic shortening the season. It would be the owners and the players, more the owners and the players shortening this season.
Chap, I know you didn't go to the bar to get a beer, because you don't like beer. I mean, that's something I've known over the years about. Did you go up and and order a drink though, or have a sandwich at the bar?
No, I have not been to a bar or a restaurant since it opened. I didn't go yesterday. I'm not planning to go today. I don't know when I Uber after the show, I might pick somebody up from one of those places, but no, I did not go.
I remember back in the day, the first time I ever went to Penn State, your Happy Valley. Going down somewhere right on the main drag there, went down to a bar in the basement where you just order the case of beers. I don't know if you ever went to that place, but and like you say, you drink the whole case, but they're like little beers. But the whole case, you just sit down in the basement. You familiar with that place? Rathskeller?
Yeah,
maybe?
the Rathskeller. Yeah. I believe one of my friends used to work there.
Nice place.
I mean,
it's a dive, but
yeah,
it's a dive, but it's a cool place to go.
Yeah, they have a few dive bars. I think actually the Rathskeller might have closed a year or two ago. So
probably blame that on James Franklin.
Yeah, he's just winning too much. Speaking of college football, let's turn the page now to the third chapter. And ESPN radio host and SEC slappy Paul Finebaum, yeah, he was at it again recently. He was on a 24/7 sports show recently, and here's what happened in that discussion.
Who do you think is the most overrated coach out there right now in the country? Someone that we talk a lot about, and
yeah, I mean, I will, in deference to him, I just don't think it's fair to mention Jim Harbaugh in this conversation, because I think that's already been retired. I mean, that would be like, wow. I mean, are you tell me something we don't already know? I'm just thinking around the country.
I'm friends with Jim Harbaugh now, by the way, so I gotta hold back my laughter.
I continue to be perplexed by James Franklin.
Really?
Yeah, I feel like he's had teams that could have done better. I don't think overrated is the appropriate word, but perplexed is.
Yeah.
I feel like his teams are always really good. And I know they've been to the Rose Bowl, but I just feel like at that level, maybe just a little bit be below where I think he should be. But I'm still searching for the overrated card.
Well, Franklin's got to beat Ohio State. I mean, they get him in Happy Valley this year, and
I mean, you're judging James Franklin on a very difficult curve.
Right.
I mean, Harbaugh is the most overrated coach in the country. I'll just go ahead and go back to and undo what I said. I mean, there's no getting around it. For what he makes, for that program, he wins the crown.
And especially what's happened to the quarterback position there.
Yeah.
You know, you thought that would be a strength, and it just
hasn't
hasn't
I've
been.
believed in them a couple of times. I mean, I kept thinking maybe they'll win at home. I mean, I'm not a hater. I'm just I've just been abused by Jim Harbaugh in believing too often that he could get it done. He can't get it done.
So there you go, Paul Finebaum saying, I've just been abused by Jim Harbaugh. Look, Dennis, you're the big Michigan slappy. Another shot at Mr. Khaki. Do you agree with Paul Finebaum, the SEC slappy, that Jim Harbaugh is the most overrated coach in college football?
Well, the one thing about Paul Finebaum, an SEC guy, or anybody else that wants to criticize Michigan, like Michigan fans know themselves. They know that they haven't beat Ohio State. They know their bowl record's terrible. They know they don't travel on the road. But they don't want to. They understand that, but they don't want to hear it over and over and over again, especially from Paul Finebaum or somebody went to Michigan State or somebody went to Penn State or somebody that might be a Michigan fan and is criticizing them. It's been 16 years since, they had their 20 years since they won the Big Ten title. So, and they haven't beaten Ohio State barely once, in that time. And I know if we're just concentrating on Jim Harbaugh, I would just say this. I remember when Jim Harbaugh was coming in. Jim Harbaugh was coming in to knock heads with Urban Meyer and Nick Saban and to win a championship, certainly win the Big Ten. And they haven't done that. So he's done some nice things. But bottom line, if over the next 5 years, if Nick Saban went 0-5 against LSU and take a Dabo Swinney, let's say Dabo Swinney went 0-5 in whatever in the Atlantic and lost all of his games to Florida State, they would say, well, Dabo's lost it, Nick Saban's lost it. It's just you don't beat your rivals and you're not winning the conference. I mean, what leg do you have to stand on, even if you're a Michigan fan? You know that. But I'll just say this to you, Chap. I've decided myself, and this was after the season, another very disappointing season there at the end, getting humiliated by Ohio State and then getting punched in the mouth in a bowl game, that I had to make the decision. Should I call for Jim Harbaugh's head and tell him to get the hell out of town and complain about him all the time? Or do I just need to turn the page and look to the next season and know that Ohio State's a juggernaut, Jim Harbaugh is working his tail off on the recruiting front, and that he knows what it takes to beat Ohio State. I mean, it's not like he's ignoring the Buckeyes. He just can't do it. He just can't do it. So you just hope for a turnaround. Not a great strategy, but, Jim Harbaugh is the Michigan coach. You just don't like hearing outsiders criticize. You're hoping for, like, this greatest turnaround and what a story it would be. But, I'm not calling for his head. If I was the AD, I would have brought him back, and he's got a lifetime contract. So what are we going to do? Even though he's got a 2-year contract, but it feels like a lifetime contract. He's a Michigan man. He can't get it done against Ohio State. All the criticism's legitimate. Nobody likes hearing it. When you're a Michigan fan, you don't like hearing the criticism. It's no fun. Criticism's no fun, and that's all they do is everybody just criticizes them.
No, you're not going to like the criticism, but it is valid.
I hate it.
It's fair when you're making all that money, when there's all that hype, when every single year people say, well, this is the year that Michigan's going to beat Ohio State and get to the college football playoff. Oh, look at this. They got Shea Patterson, who's going to turn Ole Miss, who's going to go from Ole Miss to Ole Mish. He's going to be a first-round draft pick and all that other stuff. And then Shea Patterson goes undrafted. And then they get blown out by Penn State. They get blown out by Ohio State. They 2 years ago, they put up that big checklist for the revenge tour. Oh, this team's a check mark. This team's
revenge
a check mark.
Tour, yeah.
The Deep South Buckeyes, they're just a check mark. And then they give up 62 points to them. Look, Jim Harbaugh has done a good job with 47 wins in 5 years. He's done a good job with 27 wins in the last 3 years, but not a great job. He's never won 11 games in a single season at Michigan. He's never beaten Ohio State. His best, yeah, that's right. You can keep on putting it up there. He's had one quarterback drafted. That was his first year, and he was only a 6th-round pick, and that was a transfer guy. Look, but what you're saying by saying, I don't want to fire Jim Harbaugh, I don't want him out of there, is that you're comfortable with 8 to 10 wins per year. You're comfortable with sending a lot of players to the NFL in day 3 of the draft. And it'd be nice to beat Ohio State, but let's just focus on the first 11 games per year to make us happy.
Well, part of it is that
the
part of it is you just don't see another guy out there that you say, okay, there's the guy.
That's
here's
irrelevant.
Somebody.
That's irrelevant.
No, I think that's a big part of it. Like if there was somebody, you could say, look, it's the AD's job to go out and unearth somebody or throw the money and find somebody.
Yes.
You know what? I see all of the candidates out there with all of and that's the big part of it. With all of the candidates out there, I've decided that, Ohio State's a juggernaut. and that you just wouldn't it be great if this was a Michigan man that was able to turn around? I'm just rooting for that story.
Look,
I'm just rooting for that story.
It's a
And you might
bogus talking point, Dennis, when you say that you have to name somebody or else Jim Harbaugh has to stay there, because a lot of times when you go through a coaching search, you don't know what you're going to get. When Clemson went through their coaching search, they didn't say, I have to imagine, that Dabo Swinney is going to be arguably the best coach in college football. When Penn State was going through all their nonsense because of Jerry Sandusky and Joe Paterno left, I'm sure that a lot of Penn State fans were saying, well, you know what? Let's just hope for 7 or 8 wins per year. We don't know who's ever going to want to come here. And then they bring in some guy from Vanderbilt. Freaking Vanderbilt, who's winning 9 games a year. I didn't think that he was going to lead Penn State to 3 11-win seasons in a 4-win span with a Big Ten championship. But in the last 4 years, 3 11-win seasons in a 4-year span in a Big Ten championship. Just because you don't know who that guy is doesn't mean that he's not out there. I had no clue who James Franklin was 7 or 8 years ago, but I'm glad he's the Penn State head coach right now. Michigan
That's because
fans,
you look like him.
well, that certainly helps. But you know what else helps? 11-win seasons. The last head coach to win 11 games at Michigan was Brady Hoke, and they fired him, but that was in his first year. When's Michigan going to get 11 wins? It's not going to be with Harbaugh.
Well, I've lowered my expectation. I think that's what you have to do if you're a Michigan fan. Lower your expectation and, just don't listen. I mean, you understand where it's at. Lower your expectations. Don't listen to the outside noise, and just hope for this big turnaround. You might not like that. You might think everything those are all weak talking points and everything else. But it's been there 20 years where you're hoping.
That's you're a Michigan fan who doesn't like Michigan State. That's almost like a little brother attitude where you say, hey, we're just going to not be that good. We'll be pretty good. We'll get our 9-10 wins a year, but in terms of being in the elites, we'll pay a guy to be elite. We're just not going to assume it's ever going to happen.
Yeah, well, I've got to take all that. I have lowered my expectations. It doesn't sound very good coming out of my mouth like when I'm talking about, yeah, well, you know what? Can't beat Ohio State, and they're not going to beat them this year, and I don't like any of the other coaches, and I'm hoping for some miracle turnaround, and he's a Michigan man, and I wouldn't fire him. It doesn't sound very good. I admit all of that. And I know, the thing that I really can't put my finger on and don't understand is that the one thing that I thought if we were talking 5 years ago, I would say, hey, the thing that Jim Harbaugh, the reason that he's going to make it at Michigan and win some Big Ten championships and be able to knock off Urban Meyer a few times and get to the playoff is that, man, here's a guy that knows quarterbacks. And that's been his biggest failure, has been the quarterback position. So, yeah, I mean, I hate all of that. So there's no other, the one part, if you're a Michigan fan, the reason that I think you need to take my approach of lowering your expectations. I mean, what are you going to do? You're sticking your chest out talking about, oh, Paul Finebaum doesn't know what he's talking about? Or,
no, get him out of there.
Well, you know what? I decided that I didn't want to fire him this year, so I'm going with all those other excuses and hopes and prayers. It's a Hail Mary, back on our own 5-yard line, and I'm still thinking they're going to get it into the end zone.
Yeah, you're going to take a loss in just about every bowl game. Or you're going to take not just a loss, but a blowout loss in the game before that against the Deep South Buckeyes. One name I will throw out there for someone who could be, I guess, in that conversation would be David Shaw, who is the current coach of Stanford, Jim Harbaugh, the former coach of Stanford. In their last 3 or 4 years, I was reading that Stanford was 3 years. They're 22-17. They're 4-8 last year. There was a time right before Christian McCaffrey went to the NFL when David Shaw was one of the hottest names in college football. Not so much anymore. He should be in that top 5 in terms of coaches that are overrated. With Jim Harbaugh snickering and looking down on them and saying, no, stay down there.
Yeah, I love David Shaw, though. So, down the line, he's a perfect fit for Stanford there, though, too.
Yeah,
really is.
They've got low expectations because they're a nerdy school.
Yeah, well, there you go. They're the Michigan of the West.
I don't think you'd be happy. I don't think you'd be okay keeping the coach if they were 4-8 in 2018.
Yeah, well, let's make the transition to Chapter 4. Unless you want to say anything more about you're done banging on Jim Harbaugh. You're like the the Paul Finebaum of this show.
Well, I'm just keeping it real when it comes to that.
Keeping it real.
The one thing that I would say is he brought up when he was trying to think of another name, because he said it's got to be Jim Harbaugh. Well, that's too easy. Let me think of another name. He brought up James Franklin. What did you think about him saying that my head coach James Franklin would even be in the discussion, and then just saying that he would just like a little bit more from him?
Yeah, well, I think it's fair to want a little bit more from James Franklin. He's put Penn State in some pretty good positions. Watching Penn State over the years, like it was 2 years ago when he had that inexplicable play call at the end of the game. I don't remember exactly how it went.
Against Ohio State, let's hand the ball off to Miles Sanders, and yeah, that was awful.
Yeah, and he's had a couple plays like that. Look, he's got him right there. He's doing a good job, but then he's had a handful of these plays where you're watching them, and you're just like, well, why? There's no reason. It's crazy. So to make some of these play calls, and he's had more than one of those, but that's the last one that really comes to mind. So I get that. I get that with James Franklin. When you're doing a pretty good job and you're pointing everything in the right direction, and yet you have some of these failures. You point to those play calls by Franklin. You can point to Ohio. You can point to 3 or 4 things with Harbaugh. We just went through them. We don't need to rehash those. That's and then you add into the salary with Jim Harbaugh. You see Nick Saban, Dabo Swinney, Jim Harbaugh. You're like, wait a second. You see Jimbo Fisher. You see some of the other ones. You're like Kirby Smart. These are all the highest paid coaches in America.
Yep.
And you say, well, all of those guys. I mean, Smart came within a play, of winning the championship and got Georgia there a few years ago. And, Jimbo did it when he was at Florida State. He's got that, the big contract and everything else. And, the other two, Sweeney and Saban, I mean, these are these premier coaches in college football. And what stands out of that list is Jim Harbaugh for sure. But I'm tired of, banging on Jim Harbaugh. He's coming back, and, let's cross our fingers and, hope for this great story. It would make for, like if down the line, man, wow, everything was so terrible and everybody wanted him out, and he turned everything around. So that's what I'm hoping.
Yeah, he's just got to prove the doubters wrong, and he has done nothing to do that so far. And as far as Franklin is concerned, yeah, I was sick to see that in 2017 and 18 they choked away fourth quarter leads against the Spartans and Buckeyes. And I mean, and with the Buckeyes in both of those games, it was a fourth quarter double-digit lead that was choked away. But once again, 3 out of 4 years, 11 wins. That's not being overrated, especially because when you consider the hype that Michigan gets compared to the hype that Penn State gets. How many people around the country actually know that Penn State's won 11 games 3 out of the last 4 years? If it was Michigan, I mean, they'd be running 30-second ads all day long, all across primetime networks. Michigan's won a whole lot of football games. Michigan got to the college football playoffs, but at Penn State were a little more humble. So, yeah.
I like Harbaugh over Franklin, so
okay.
That just goes. All right, now we turn.
Good for you.
Now we turn the page and get to Adrian Peterson, Hall of Fame running back, still out there, coming back for another season. He's all those years with the Vikings, with the Redskins now, and AP says that a lot of players, including himself, are set to take a knee if there's going to be a season. And support, like Colin Kaepernick, police brutality. But then Roger Goodell came out in a video and supports the protests with the players, whether it's his legacy, whether he's following the winds of change here. You can say whatever you want, but he did say that the NFL was going to support that. Everybody seems to support that except your guy, Donald Trump, who says he's not supporting. No kneeling.
That's right. I'll put the tweet up on the screen. This is actually a tweet that was sent out on Friday, and actually at 10 minutes before Adrian Peterson's comments came out about how many players were going to be taking a knee. And he said we should be standing up straight and tall, ideally with a salute or a hand on our heart. There are other things you can protest, but not our great flag, great American flag. No kneeling. And then on Sunday, another tweet. Could it be, and this is in response to the Roger Goodell comments, could it be even remotely possible that in Roger Goodell's rather interesting statement of peace and reconciliation, he was intimating that it would now be okay for players to kneel, in all caps, or to not stand for the national anthem, thereby disrespecting our country and our flag. Those are the tweets by President Trump.
Yeah, well, hello, Donald. This is a little bit different. This is the time when you're a leader that you take a situation like this and stop thinking about, the election and stop, to open. You need to open up your eyes a little bit and bring America together. I don't know. I know he watches the news, sitting there tweeting about it all day long, about guys fake falling and in Buffalo and everything else. Figure this out. You could be, we sit around talking about baseball and what they could do. Man, if the president opened his eyes up a little bit and looked to mend these fences and bring people closer together instead of tearing them apart, what he could do. But, he seems to have not gotten that memo.
Well, I think he's gotten the memo. It's just what he chooses to do with the memo. And I think he sees that, matter of fact, I know he sees because he tweets about it, the change is going on in this country. He saw Drew Brees change his mind and criticize Drew Brees for doing so. And then Drew Brees came back and put out an Instagram statement that said, to President Trump, with a lengthy statement after that. He saw Roger Goodell flip, so he knows what's going on. He's just saying, despite all that, no kneeling, and it sure would be interesting if the NFL would allow these players to disrespect our flag when none of the players have said, I'm doing this to disrespect the flag. As a matter of fact, it was Nate Boyer, a former Green Beret, a former NFL player, and a former Green Beret being part of the military, who suggested don't sit on the bench, Colin Kaepernick, take a knee. I mean, these guys are obeying a military officer's suggestion. I think that these players this year are going to ignore President Trump. And I think that a lot of the owners who, according to many media reports, support President Trump are going to ignore President Trump as well. I thought it was very strange 3 years ago that despite their love for President Trump, which is fine, and despite who they voted for, that they were allowing the president to make decisions in their league. It wasn't it wasn't like United States Football League run by the Senate and the Congress and all that. It was the National Football League run by Roger Goodell and the owners, and they said, hey, we're just going to listen to what the president wants. I think this year there will be owners who are going to ignore, maybe even a lot, maybe even most or all the owners who ignore what the president is tweeting about kneeling. And I predict that we'll have anthem kneelers, black and white, on all 32 NFL teams.
Well, when Roger Goodell put out that video, he had to contact the rest of the owners, and they had to give him approval to go out there and do that. And so now his boys that Robert Kraft, Patriots owner, you know their relationship, Jerry Jones as well. What we need is for those two guys specifically to come out and say, look, we might like Donald Trump, but this is different circumstances here. We're trying to do something where we're looking at this situation and we're trying to see what we can do to bring people together. And the situation with our friend here, it's not working that way. So we're going against that. And right here in Detroit, even though I'm down in Florida right now, what would be bigger in our state if you could have Martha Firestone Ford, who's going to be 95 years old at the beginning of the football season, if we have one in 2020, she could go back and say, she knows what happened in the United States. Look, really, in the 30s. She's a young lady in the 40s, 50s. I mean, all the way through. You can, like Martha Ford could remember, what this country was like, in the Great Depression, and then coming out through the 40s and 50s and everything through that. And you talk about, just the names Ford and Firestone and privilege and wealth and everything else, what it could mean. And if she can't put the thoughts together and verbalize them when she's sitting down there, could you get, Sheila Hamp or Rod Wood or whoever else is, Team Ford up there to sit there and read and like, they did with their, even though it was stupid, with their season ticket holder statement that they had. But this situation, it doesn't have to be like that. She can really step up. That would be very interesting to hear from somebody like Martha Ford, who can take you back to the 30s. and what this country was like.
Well, Martha Ford is a name that we're going to be watching, at least around in the Metro Detroit area. A name that everyone's going to be watching is going to be Jerry Jones, because he was very against the anthem protesting. He was very against the kneeling when it started 3-4 years ago. And when it comes to President Trump's suggestion about what to do, he might be the one that could do it. And if you're not familiar with President Trump's suggestion, here is what he suggested 3 years ago.
Our flag to say, get that son of a bitch off the field right now, out. He's fired. He's fired. Some owner's going to do that. He's going to say, that guy that disrespects our flag, he's fired. And that owner, they don't know it. They don't know it. They're friends of mine, many of them. They don't know it. They'll be the most popular person for a week.
So that's his suggestion, to have an owner say you're fired. I mean, I can't imagine that if we're going into week 1, if Dak Prescott just signed a 5-year extension to become one of the top 5 highest paid players in the league, if he decides to take a knee, that Jerry Jones is going to say, you're fired and you're a son of a bitch. I can't imagine that these owners who would love for them to stand at salute and with a hand on their heart and all that stuff, I can't imagine that they're going to sacrifice wins and money because of that, especially if the whole public sentiment has shifted.
Well, I can't believe that if you're somebody that likes Donald Trump, you've just been watching what's been transpiring over the last days. I'm sitting down here in St. Augustine. I'm watching the local news. They're toppling down a statue from 1898, Leonard Fournette's, leading protesters through the street.
Wasn't it a Confederate statue?
It was. The time, the point here, when we know that George Floyd was laid to rest today. Look at the time, what's happening right now. This is the time for you. If over the years you've just dug in with I'm with Trump, and these guys are sons of bitches, and now that's the time is to pull back, and it's up to you if you're somebody that is a loyal follower to say, look, our leader here, while I might like him, the time is for to not be divisive here. It's upon each individual here to go out here and try to see what they can do to bring this country together. Because right now, man, you got statues going into the river. In the Great Britain, you got people, toppling things down. I mean, this is, talk about, days upon days here of just stunning real life things that are going on, man. It's not just time to sit back and tweet about, I'm all with Donald Trump.
Well, they can be that way, but I mean, there's a lot of folks that, at least in terms of this issue, are not with him. And one thing that'll really get him going on Twitter is that the NFL turns so significantly against not kneeling that some team signs Colin Kaepernick. I don't know if he will play this year, but he should, and I think that would be a very clear symbol to America that the NFL apologizes for their reaction back in 2017 and 18 and 19 by not hiring Colin Kaepernick, and that they have reversed course. If an NFL team went out there and said, you know what, we're not worried about the quote-unquote media circus, we're not worried about how he'll be received in the locker room, especially because it appears that locker rooms have changed, I think that would be a significant step forward, that whether you're the president, whether you like the president or not, whether you're an NFL fan or not, people would realize that things have significantly changed if he gets signed.
And to that point, I think he's washed up, and I always was wondering how much money that if he wanted to come in and play for backup money, whatever that would be. I don't know. Chase Daniels get pretty good money as a backup, but if he wanted to play for backup money and just show that he could play, it would be interesting to see if a team would take him. The point that I thought a couple of years ago is that, teams don't want to take a guy that's going to be a backup and be a distraction because of this situation. But right now, this distraction is a movement, and people are in the streets every night talking about this. So To me, if it's not going to be, you can't, force a team to go out there and say, hey, give them a chance and, pay them money to come into your football team. But I do think that the NFL and Roger Goodell could create a position for him in the front office where, he could work with towards diversity and
the front office. Dude wants to play. I mean, that would be.
I don't
the
know.
ultimate
Does he want to play?
cop-out.
Last year he set up everything, and then 30 minutes before, had it on his terms, looked a little bit overweight.
Yeah, I think that was sloppy, but the scouts that went there said that he looked like he could still play, and you're not going to be showing that you are completely changing if you say, oh, we're just going to put Colin Kaepernick in charge of our diversity and police brutality unit where he can just have a corner office in Manhattan. Kaepernick would turn that down, and he would work on his own initiatives. You want to make a statement, then say, we're not going to be blackballing players anymore when they want to make a protest, a peaceful protest. We're going to allow them to play, especially because he wasn't the only one kneeling, but he's the only one that's been blackballed this long.
Well, I'll tell you what, no team right now is going to sign him. Everybody has their situation. It's like Cam Newton. Like, I didn't think Cam Newton should sign with anyone either. I thought he should have waited to the start of the season, if there is one, and then that injuries are going to come about, and then he could go in there and be a starter. With Kaepernick, I think if that's the route, that if he really wants to play, I think that's the route that he needs to go. But for Kaepernick, it also needs to be a situation where it needs to be, and there's a lot of NFL teams that, if you look back to what San Francisco ran, that he could fit. There's a lot more systems that he could fit in. Where if you're looking over that's how much the league has changed over the last 2 or 3 years. Where you're like, yeah, he really needs this system, and how much money does he really want? And there was the distraction. Now there's more systems. I think that if he's out there and if he's really serious about it, he can. I think that a team could. I mean, I've watched your tweets over the last 2 or 3 years. You're like, oh, who's this guy that they're bringing in? Guys that that nobody's ever heard of. Look at the Lions this year. Some of the guys that they were bringing in. Remember the guy from Colorado State and all that? Yeah, so if he really wants to play, it's not going to be signing in some exhibition season and some team bringing him in. Not because of the distraction. It's just because the quarterback rooms are already set. It's going to be when somebody gets hurt.
No, that's true, and it's also going to have to be after these teams can bring in players for workouts because they're going to want to see what kind of shape he's in. There's been a lot of reports that he's been working out 6-7 days a week, but coaches want to see that.
Me too.
Working on that 50 and 50.
Working on it, man.
All right, Dennis, let's now turn the page to the 5th chapter. And that's when we play, at least today, Spartan, Wolverine, or Buckeye. And
yeah, you would think this would be pretty easy, but I am not very good at this game.
No, you're not very good at this game. For those that are watching for the first time, I've got 5 headlines, and I'll read the headline to Dennis, and he has to guess if that person, or perhaps entity, is a Spartan, a Wolverine, or a Buckeye. It could be a famous person like Tom Izzo. It could be someone who's not famous like a gymnast or a random student or a random fan. We encourage you guys to play along with us as you watch and you listen. Here's an easy sample question so you guys know how this game works. Dennis, here's the headline. Famous 1990s college basketball star returns to his alma mater to coach the team. Is that a Spartan, a Wolverine, or a Buckeye?
Wolverine!
There you go. That's Juwan Howard. So now you guys see how the game works. Let's go with the first headline. A black college female student was the target of a racist social media post after a video was posted Monday by a white female student from blank meaning the college, chiding her for engaging in interracial dating. In this case, is the blank a female from Michigan State, Michigan, or Ohio State? Is that racist person who posted the video a Spartan, a Wolverine, or a Buckeye?
Gosh. I got some feedback coming in here. I'm going to say Ohio State.
Just so you know, according to the story, the racist woman was upset that her ex-boyfriend was seen dancing with a black woman. That's what prompted her to send that viral tweet. Sticking with
Ohio
Buckeye?
State. Yeah.
Think Buckeyes a little bit more racist than Spartans and Wolverines?
I don't know. You know what? Anything that if it's a really bad situation, and I've got to guess between the three schools, so I'm going to go with Ohio State.
Yeah, that's a good guess, and it's correct. The answer is Buckeye. The woman is Caitlin Rust. She deleted her tweet, but according to a report, it said, "F yourself. You're hooking up with a black girl. That's weird." The victim says she couldn't believe that the color of her skin was weird, and the racist was a member of a sorority at Ohio State, and the Pan-Hellenic Association had to apologize for her tweet. So there you go. You're 1 for 1. If you get 3 right, 3 out of the 5 right, you are a winner. Second headline, a man who skipped his own armed robbery trial after stripping naked and wiping feces on his body is heading to prison. Is that man a Spartan, a Buckeye, or a Wolverine?
Well, it worked the first time, and it's another disgusting move here. I'll go with Ohio State.
Says that he and 2 others robbed a man of $35,000 in casino winnings. Think
Yeah,
a Buckeye?
Still, yeah. This points right down south. This points right to OSU. Yep.
And you are correct. The answer is Buckeye. The man is 33-year-old Wendell Watkins Sr., and we know that the man is a Buckeye because the crime took place in Columbus, Ohio. The story says that after authorities found him smeared in feces on the jail toilet, they decided to continue with the trial. A psychologist ruled that Watkins was pretending to be mentally ill. So there you go. You're 2 for 2, Dennis.
Gross game.
What's that?
Gross game, but hey, I'm 2 for 2.
That's right. You get any one of the next 3 right, and you win. Third headline as we play Spartan, Wolverine, or Buckeye. Former college health physicist accused of having sex with dog pleads guilty to misdemeanor.
Ohio State. Let's do it.
Story says the man was 52 years old. You think that 52-year-old man was a Buckeye? That's a Buckeye thing to do, be engaged in bestiality?
Yes, I do.
Well, the answer is Spartan. You're wrong about that. Story says that he was originally charged with 2 felony bestiality counts. One was dropped because there wasn't enough evidence. The other was dismissed in connection with the plea and said that the man had, quote, genital contact with the dog and reached around toward its anus before it ran away. So obviously the dog thought the man was barking up the wrong tree. And the story also says the man's name was Joseph Hattie, and that Max Rapp testified that Hattie responded to an ad on Craigslist in order to do all this. So
the Mad Hattie.
Yes, the Mad Hattie. And
there's an old song, an old rugby song that I know that it was a spoof on bestiality. It was something about shag a wallaby, but yeah, it's another despicable story there, for sure.
Yeah, that guy was definitely giving the dog a rough day. Fourth headline: a former student is facing criminal charges for taking the SAT for 6 other students. This is a student from Long Island, New York. Is that student a Spartan, a Wolverine, or a Buckeye?
Well, a lot of East Coast students matriculate to Ann Arbor. It's one of those, something under the table there to get them into the university. That sounds like it could have happened in Ann Arbor. I'll go with Michigan.
So you think Michigan students are more likely to cheat to get in, and it's not worth it to cheat to get into Michigan State or Ohio State?
You know what? I go with the East Coast matriculation line again. I've heard that over the years. A lot of alumni coming from the East Coast. That sounds like a Michigan. Sounds like a Michigan. The Michigan's the answer. I feel it.
Well, I've Ubered in Ann Arbor a lot, and I can vouch that there are a lot of Michigan students there from the East Coast. And the answer is Wolverine. You are correct. Sam Eschagoff was the student. He spent his first year of college at the University of Michigan before transferring to Emory University. He was arrested in his first year at Emory. 5 students paid $1,500 to $2,500 for him to take the SAT. and one student got it for free. I wonder how that student got him to take it for free.
I don't know, but you know what? It's underhanded and everything else, but it's not as bad as having your mom and dad, pay the professor or whatever was going on with some of those to get people in school. Yeah, how does that work? What you have to go? You got to go. You slide the SAT on the floor over to somebody.
I've never done that. I know there were some rumors about it happening at with some of my classmates, but I guess you just write in somebody else's name and their social security number, and then you go take the test, and then you hand it in. I don't know how it works in terms of having to show ID, but I mean it has happened. It happened in that situation. It's been going on for years. I would assume that there are ways to get around that, but yeah, it happens. It happens.
I had some answers. I don't remember what kind of I don't remember what class it was for, but it was one of those Scantron tests, and it was like 40, 50 questions or something. For some reason, I was able to come up. Somebody gave me all the answers, and I wrote them on the inside of my shoe, and so I just had to look down. If you just fold your shoe out, it worked so well. I'm sitting there every 3 or 4 answers. I'm like, yeah, maybe I just better chalk up a D here, to show that I'm going to get a few wrong there, but that probably says a lot. Well, we have some feedback. I won the game, which is
yes, that's
a good
right.
feeling because I haven't done that. Yeah, thank you. We got Raj wants Chap to take a shot of goat's milk on Thursday's show if he's unable to come up with the big game answers.
Ugh, no, I'm not taking no goat milk. No.
Well, you can read into goat's milk. It's supposed to be good for arthritis, but right now with our goats, and I am down in St. Augustine, Florida, so it's not going to happen on Thursday. I'm not coming back until the weekend. But our goats, I'm not exactly sure. I think we got to get them pregnant. I think they have to be pregnant to produce. And again, I'm not 100% sure about that, so I don't even know why I'm saying it, but there's no goat's milk right now coming from my goats. All right. Here's somebody that, at first I'm like, I don't understand this. It says we are, but now I get it.
That's right. Penn State.
Here's another one. It says, what are your guys' expectations for Mel Tucker going into his first season?
Well, look, last year was his first year and only year at Colorado, and they went 5-7. Michigan State last year, they barely squeaked into a bowl game. He's got no quarterback. So just to be safe, not going to make a bowl game. And I think that's fair to say, not going to make a bowl game. It's going to be a rough year for Michigan State. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, I think the quarterback's the biggest thing. I don't know if they can still pull somebody through the portal or something here if somebody jumps up. But, yeah, looking at their quarterback room right now, I do not see a 500 season for Coach Tuck up in East Lansing. Raj again says Harbaugh should bring in Kaepernick as a quarterbacks coach. That would be a big splash for the team and really help mold the quarterbacks on the roster. The first thing I think about that, Cap as a quarterback coach at Michigan and Dylan McCaffrey, who is, I want to say, a run-first quarterback, but that's certainly he is in the mold of a Kaepernick. I mean, that's the kind of offense that they're going to run. Cap to Michigan as a quarterback coach. I like it, Raj. I'm in.
Kaepernick needs to be playing. No quarterback coach.
Maybe he's washed up.
Well, let's see it on the field. Let's have him prove that he's washed up before we assume that he's washed up.
Well, he hasn't played in a few. Well, he hasn't played in a few years, and even at the end there, he played himself out of being a starter. I mean, he looked like he was going to be a backup, and then when you don't play for that many years, I mean,
well, hold on a second.
There's much more of a chance.
He played on an awful team that had the worst defense in the NFL. They were 32nd in points allowed. People forget that, and he had 16 touchdowns and I believe it was 4 interceptions in his final year. So people can talk all they want about, he just wasn't all that good. He had no help around him, and in terms of his touchdown-interception ratio, it was very good. So, no, I don't buy that we know for a fact that he's terrible, and I'm not buying for any second that he was terrible in his final year.
Too long of a layoff.
Oh, well, that might be true. We'll see that. If it was too long of a layoff, if he gets that
opportunity. You know what? I really do hope a team signs him because for a couple reasons. One, it would generate a tremendous amount of excitement. And from 3 or 4 years ago, or over the last 3 or 4 years, the biggest reason I didn't think teams would sign him, one, I thought we never knew how much money he wanted, but it was all about the distraction angle. And I really thought, like, why would a team want to bring in a backup quarterback with the distraction? Well, right now, it's not a distraction. This is number one on everybody's mind in America right now, and going into a football season. That shouldn't be the angle that people are talking about, or that shouldn't be the reason. It should be like, hey, that's not a distraction. This is actually something that we want to talk about. So that should be out the window, and it should just be based on whether or not, I don't know what the money is going to be, whether or not he could actually play, which it should have been before. I get it, but the distraction angle was something in previous years, but it shouldn't be now.
Oh, you're right about that.
All right, chat. Well, we are going to be back on a Thursday. If the rain stays away, maybe I can be out poolside by a palm tree. I'm looking into that. It just stopped raining right before the show, and I went out there, and the rain was hitting the gutters. I thought that wouldn't be good for the sound there. But coming up on Thursday, you got John Jones, you've got Conor McGregor. The Bones Jones wants more money. McGregor, he's hanging him up again unless he gets the cash. And Dana White says he's okay with two of the biggest stars ever in UFC just walking away. Whose side you on there? Who's bluffing when it comes down to that? We'll get to that on Thursday's show here on the Fifth Chapter.
He represents the mitten by way of Penn State. When Chapman gets to talking sports, the people can't wait. He represents the mitten. Be a true EMU, but cut Dennis in the fall, and his veins bleeding blue. They got respect around the state. When that light turns red, so don't sleep on these dudes. Just invite your friends to cut your nap short and tip your cap for and sit back for the Fifth Chapter. Huh. Brian Chapman. Dennis Fithian. When they open their mouths, they spitting the facts, bruh. This ain't even